sorting the sound things best we've got. Right, welcome back everyone. I hope you've had a nice 10-minute break, 7 break, coffee break, wherever it happens to be. Don't forget the fingers for questions. We've not been very good today. I'm going to get a picture later of everyone's finger up in the air. We've got Paul's on now for 45 minutes-ish. We've got lunch coming at 1:45, which is doesn't feel that long away because I'm starving now. Don't forget the bags. We've got pens and mugs if you've not already got them. I'm not taking them home, so wherever we've got at the end of the day has got to go. And lanyards with raffle tickets in. So make sure you got a unless you've actually paid for the event. Oh, he's got one without a raffle ticket. That's good. So if you've not got one, make sure you get one during the day, and we'll do a draw at the end of the day, and you have a chance of winning a prize. Right. Thanks very much. We're off.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Amazing. This is my first event of this type, so really was looking forward to it. And the thing about lunch is my father always told me never get between a man and his food. Yeah, you may have heard that phrase. He's a man who's fond of his Sunday lunch. So I'm not going to stand in the way of your food. I'm going to make sure that you're as hungry as possible before lunch. And this particular presentation is a figment of my imagination based on the Linux agent, for the Veeam Linux agent. So it's called the Linux Factor. And in my opinion, presentations are very much like burgers. You get a soft fluffy bit at the top of the brioche bun with your sesame seeds on top. You get the meat of the presentation in the middle. And then right at the bottom you get that fluffy bread brioche bun at the bottom as well. So just watch out for that, okay? Because you may notice it throughout this presentation. So, Veeam Agent for Linux. The fluffy bits. The bit on the top, we're just biting into the bun. Maybe you taste the sesame seeds already. Anybody getting hungry? Okay, so Veeam Agent for Linux comes in 3 flavors: free, workstation and server. I'm not going to labor this, but 24/7 365 support, the awesome support from Veeam, comes with workstation and server comes with 3 extra facilities, which is support for multiple jobs, which is certainly useful in a Linux server environment. Pre-freeze and post-thaw for those occasions where you really need to stop a database, flush the memory and write before you do the backup, and guest file indexing and catalog search. Okay, still on the fluffy stuff. Simple and free backup agent for Linux anywhere. Yes, there's a free version, but there are 2 paid-for versions as well. Protect the entire computer or create volume level or file level backups. We know this, as I said, we're still in that top bit of the burger at the moment. We've not got to the meat of it. Built-in snapshot and change block tracking drivers, and they're done by a dynamically loadable kernel module. Okay, that's important. It's not a module that we have to recompile the kernel for to put those features in, but it is a dynamically loadable module. And it's integrated into Veeam Backup and Replication, of course, as you'd expect. And this is a picture of what it looks like. As you can see, Linux servers typically don't present a GUI of any kind, so that's as near as you get to a GUI. It's a menu system. So in summary, why have we done it? Why have we had agents? Well, you know the way of the world. We're all doing cloud. We need to be able to back up from hyperscalers, from reseller environments, enable the migration from one to another. And as a consequence of that, and preparing for that market, Veeam has also been able to present to customers the ability to be able to back up physical servers as well. Okay, that's the fluffy stuff. We're past the brioche. We're now starting to taste the salad on top with the tomato ketchup. Okay, so how do I start with Veeam Agent for Linux? Well, typically, most people download the executable, download the installable and think, right, how do I start? Where do I go? Where do I install this? All right, so no, read the manual first. The manual isn't that long. It's not like 1,300 pages for the Veeam agent for Linux. It's worth reading. There's some excellent, excellent stuff in there. And then once you've done that, read it again, okay? Because if you're anything like me, I skim read the first time, and then I really look at it the second time, okay? And find the stuff I missed. Follow the installation instructions. Know your source Linux machine. See what I did there? By know your source Linux machine, what I mean is, if you're going to recover a Linux machine, it's not a Linux physical server. It's not just like restoring straight back as you would do with Windows. Yeah, Linux has a much wider range of file systems, much wider range of bootloaders, much wider range of partitioning. Yes, and we've also got Linux Volume Manager involved as well, potentially. Okay, so I'll go back to this one. Do not skip steps. Create a test VM to practice on. Best advice I can give you. If you're going to restore, if you're going to recover, and you're going to back up a physical machine to protect, then create a virtual machine with the same OS on, and just do a practice, just do a test. It's easier to do it in a VM. You can blow it away, you can start again, and you can repeat the process. Document it if you wish. Yeah? Okay, so that's know your source Linux machine. So what do I mean specifically by that? You need to know what the bootloader is. Okay, you need to know about the partition sizes that are on the physical machine. All right, and this is before you get to the point where you need to recover it. So I've got a Linux physical server. I'll stick the agent on it. It's protected now. Please don't take that attitude. You really need to practice those restores. All right. Where is the recovery ISO? We'll cover that in a little while. How do I use the agent? Yeah, and I'm no Linux guru. Okay, how many Linux gurus have we got in the place? Hands up, come on. Own up. One. Any more? Wow, okay. I'm not a Linux guru. I don't consider myself to be a Linux guru, although I have used Linux on and off ever since Slackware 2. Okay, and if people don't even know what Slackware is, it's a long, long time ago. And where do I find help? Usual places, I would suspect. So what do I need to run the agent? I need hardware. Yeah, okay, I need some hardware. I don't need an awful lot of hardware. The 10 gig network is preferred, okay, but it's not absolutely crucial. Multiple 1 gig connections can also help. So system firmware as well, BIOS or UEFI. Universal Extensible. Come on, Universal Extensible Firmware Interface? Yeah? I can never remember that kind of acronym. Okay, so what distributions does Veeam support with its agents, with its agent for Linux? There are a lot. I'm not going to read them all out and express them all, but I typically use Ubuntu. It's a Debian-based distribution. So throughout these slides, you will see references to the Ubuntu commands to process the Linux agent for Linux, the Veeam agent for Linux. Okay. Now, one of the things we often get asked about here is about the Red Hat compatible kernel and the unbreakable enterprise kernel. So just make a special note in your head that if a customer comes back to you, or if you need to do that because there's a specific requirement, then we support those as well. File systems supported. Lots and lots and lots of them. I said earlier on at the beginning that Linux is a complicated beast, or can be a complicated beast. And as you can see down here, we cover most of the popular Linux file systems. Does anybody use a B-tree file system anymore, by the way? How many people know what that is? Thank you. It is. It's Novell. Yes. So yeah, I used to work on that years ago. exFAT, Riser 4 and UFS. So those are the ones that are not supported at the moment. Many, many more are supported. And we've got Linux Volume Manager 2 here. Just bear in mind that Linux Volume Manager can be used for a physical device or for a volume level device that's formatted with file system. We support the latter, not the former. Okay? All right, so what can you use as a backup target for the Linux agent? You can use almost anything that you can use with Veeam. You can use the Veeam backup and replication repository, which gives you absolutely the best response and the best value in terms of you're now able to use all your explorers. We've also got shared network folder there, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but shared network folder is a possibility, and also hard drives. There are people who want to seed remote devices, remote Linux servers, perhaps ones that stand in a connected site, but the site has poor links. Then using the hard drive can solve a lot of those problems. So file share backup targets. Veeam Agent for Linux can use NFS and SMB. Okay, somebody thought I was going to say CIFS then, weren't you? It's SMB. So we use SMB or NFS. Now, if you're using an SMB target, remember that the originating OS, the originating Linux OS, will need to have SMB installed on it, Samba or whatever packages you need for your Linux distribution. So it will need SMB on it. So as a consequence, because usually you won't want to add SMB just to back up the machine, typically you will use NFS rather than SMB in that environment. So what would be useful if you're not used to configuring NFS targets is to have a little look at that and just figure out how it's done in your environment or in the customer's environment, and see whether there's somebody there that can actually configure the NFS export for you. And the other thing is, you don't need SMB to be installed if you're going to connect directly to the VBR server. All right, this is only for file shares. All right. What goes wrong? What goes wrong is a lot of the time people download the wrong architecture when they first try and install this. You may visit a customer site or go and help somebody and they've actually downloaded the wrong architecture. So make sure that you download the right architecture in the first place. You will have a lot less issues if you do that, and it will not work if you get the wrong one. What else do I need to know? Okay, so the Veeam supports any kernel version 2.6.32 onwards. Okay, it's proprietary Veeam snapshotting. We're not dependent on LVM, but if you are using LVM, please make sure it's Linux Volume Manager 2, not the original. Okay, and rule number 1, most server distributions these days will give you the kernel header package as part of the default installation, because they assume that if you're installing a server, you're going to install software that's going to need make and GCC plus or whatever to be able to compile something into the kernel, and that's typical day to day. So on Ubuntu, if it's not there, sudo, anybody heard of sudo? Anybody know what it is? Great. Admin elevation. So sudo apt cache policy Linux headers generic will tell you whether they're installed, and if so, what version. Yeah, and then you can check to see whether they're actually installed, whether the correct versions are installed against uname-a, which is showing you which kernels there. We've also got sudo apt-get install Linux headers generic. Okay, this should install the headers if they're not already there. Typically, desktop type distributions don't put the headers in, but server distributions in general will. Okay, not talking about every distribution here. So we need DKMS and we need LVM2, especially if you're using Linux Volume Manager, of course, that will always be there. And then the ability to install those is simply sudo apt-get install dkms and a concatenation command and sudo apt-get linux lvm2. Another one of the common problems we have with people who install our agent is that they read the manual and interpret it literally. Okay, so they'll take the commands and they'll cut and paste them into the interface. All right. So when they cut and paste this command in the manual it says apt-get install dkms and apt-get lvm2. All right, that won't work because you need to elevate both sides because there are effectively two commands here. Okay, so you need to put sudo at both sides of the concatenation concatenation. It's not an easy word to say, that, is it? Especially for a man who's lost his luggage on the train this morning. Just so that you know, my luggage is in Lime Street at the moment. Okay, so remember sudo. It will bite back. For Debian and Ubuntu, dpackage-i for the install. /veeam release, whatever, and apt-get update. Great. Okay, that's not going to work. In most Linux distributions, you do need sudo before each of the commands themselves. All right, so just ping that into the brain and remember it. All right, so anybody getting even more hungry yet? Okay, so we're halfway through the meat and the cheese now. We've got a taste of the tomato ketchup, and do you think we might get one of those today? What are the Five Guys like, Mike? Are they as good as this? The Five Guys burgers, are they as good as this? Being a vegetarian, of course, I don't partake in these things, but I know Mike enjoys the Five Guys. So what does it look like? Okay, so what does it look like? It looks like this. Yes, it's not a pretty GUI. It's not very user-friendly, if you like, as such, but it does what it does, and it does it well. Okay, so this is a screenshot of the selection for what backup mode you're going to use, entire machine, volume level or file level backup. And another one, what does it look like too, of the destination. So you can choose a local attached storage device, as we discussed earlier, shared folder, SMB or NFS, need SMB on the server if you're going to do that, and a Veeam backup and replication server.
The entire machine, is that a bare metal?
Ah, good question. That's a good question. I'm coming on to that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so what else do I need to know? Well, Veeam Agent for Linux scheduling uses Linux cron for its scheduling. So Linux admins who love to script will not have a problem with the particular implementation that we've decided upon. And the backups are mounted for recovery at /mount backup, MNT backup. Okay, so they're very easy to find and do something with whatever you want to do. And we also have a good CLI for script integration. I would say I hope it improves because there's still some more to do. However, it is a very good level of integration already. Okay. And we have the common command builder here, where Veeam config space start command tab, start command tab, start parameter tab, and you get tab completion. Okay. So, coming to your question, recovery. We're doing okay for time now. So, recovery options. Veeam Agent for Linux UI. Note there's no G there. File level recovery and volume level recovery for non-system partitions. Why can't you use the UI for system partitions? Because it's already running. It's using it. You can't replace it whilst it's running. Okay, so you can't replace the system or the swap partitions whilst the VM or physical server is running. So if you want to replace or restore the system partitions, you have to use the recovery mode boot disk. Okay, so the boot disk can do file level recovery, should you wish, volume level recovery, which is usually the means that you use to replace partitions that are on the disks of the physical server or virtual server that you're restoring, and bare metal recovery with caveats. Okay, it's fair to say that any Linux bare metal recovery is going to need a level of Linux skills. Okay, especially if you're moving from one vendor's hardware to another vendor's hardware. The array controllers are different, the network cards are different, all sorts of things. Yeah, there are so many variables there that you need somebody who really knows Linux if you're going to do this bare metal recovery. So why did I start off by saying do practice in a VM, and that's the reason. Yeah.
So could you, for speedy recovery, let's say you've lost your physical server, can't fix it, so your next step would be to look for another
Physical server.
Yeah. Could you actually restore into a VM instead?
Yes. No reason why not. Indeed, I recommend you do that when you're practicing, before you get to the point where it's lost. And if you, this is why I was saying about know your Linux server, because if you know the partition size, you know what type of bootloader there is, you know what version of that kernel you were on. Okay, it makes that recovery process so much more easy. Even if you are moving to another piece of physical tin, but yes, you can push it back as a VM. Okay. Okay, so recovery via the UI looks like this. I've got some daily backups. I select my backup and I select where I'm going to restore it to. Via the boot ISO, these are the options from the boot ISO. So where is the boot ISO? It's included in the distribution download. It's in the disk itself. But when you download it, in fact, I think I've got it soon in a slide. When you download it, you get an option on the download page to download the boot ISO as well. So you can restore volumes, files, configure the network, because of course this is a boot ISO. It knows nothing about what was underneath before it booted the machine. And yes, you can use that in a virtual machine as well. Okay. So configure the network, switch to command line, reboot and shut down. Those are the options on that one. Here's a couple of random screenshots. This is a view of the backups that have been imported. Maybe a bit difficult to see from where you are, but you will be getting the slides afterwards. Yeah. And the view of a mounted shared folder. So if we are using SMB, it's been installed, we can give it the path and the domain, the username and password, and so long as it connects, it'll mount that shared folder and you can use that to recover with. Okay?
So if you're already going to Veeam repository, connect to the Veeam repository.
Yes. Yes, that's right. So that SMB screen was purely to show you the options that you need to put in. Okay? So so you can open online help from the Veeam agent for Linux. It's probably not your first point of approach, but the users can do that. You can visit Veeam community forums, where there are an excellent number of interactions. And if you've got a paid license installed, of course, you can go to Veeam to Support, which is excellent. Recommended reading. No surprises. Veeam Agent for Linux user manual. As I say, it is good. It's well worth the read, and it doesn't take forever. So if you can't sleep one night or something, then just download the PDF and have a read through. The release notes are equally interesting and useful. Okay, so please read both. There's a Luca De Loca's blog post, which is also in here, about restoring Linux file volumes. If you haven't seen it already, go search it out. You know the usual places where to find that. And there's a Veeam YouTube channel, which I'm sure you're all avid watchers of. But just in case, I've added that on there as well. So you get these slides, you get these links. Everybody's okay. Good. Okay. Right. Now we're down to the bottom of the brioche. We're down to the fluffy bit at the very bottom. Is anybody satisfied yet? No, I want my dinner, I want my lunch. Okay, so the next steps. Yeah, you know where endpoint backup is. You've probably used it yourself. If you haven't got it on your laptop, then maybe you should have. And the Veeam agent for Linux is at goveeam.com/Linux. Okay. Key takeaways. Life is like a box of chocolates, according to Forrest Gump's mum. Presentations are like burgers, and Veeam is like awesome. Okay. Q&A. Fingers.
The agent available as part of the distro repo?
Is the agent? Yes. Yes, when part of the installation process is that you download our package. That package adds the repo to that particular machine's repo store. So yes, part of the installation is that you can do apt-get install Veeam, and it will pull down the right packages. Okay. Again, if you get the wrong package in the first place, if you choose the wrong architecture, that won't work. Okay. Any more fingers? Sorry, that's a great question. I wish I could answer it. Perhaps Mike can. I think if I was backing up, there's nothing to stop you doing a copy job on an agent backup, of course. So maybe that would be the way that the way I might approach it if I got a customer who was really, really wanting to get it into Cloud Connect. But replication is, of course, a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so today we have to go into a Veeam backup and replication
Server, yeah, into a repo.
Backup copy to Cloud Connect or pay another storage tier.
Yep.
Probably get shocked for saying this, but version 2 of the agent will bring up the features and feature parity of what we have with Veeam agent for Windows version 2. Now, so have the ability to get Cloud Connect directly from the agent.
Okay.
You didn't hear that.
We didn't hear that from me.
Someone at the back.
In fact, I didn't even hear it. Any more questions? Well, let's ask a different question. Let me ask you one. How many people here either have Linux servers they need to protect now, or deal with customers who have Linux physical or cloud-based servers that they know they want to protect? Good, excellent. All right, so there are some. We tend to work in, we collectively in the Veeam community tend to work in primarily the Windows space, but that's something that we do naturally. We do less, we move less in Linux circles, so we need to get into those conversations anyway and make sure that people know they can cover off those Linux servers either in the cloud or physical. Any more questions?
Yes. When you do the move from the ISO, what sort of network card support's in there?
Oh, great question. The answer is it depends. Okay, no, it doesn't depend. There is a very good level of support for the common manufacturers. However, if you choose something that is a little bit odd or obscure, I'm not sure that Mellanox 40 gig cards are on there, or it's the ones that are more obscure you're going to have a problem with. So just double check that. But there's no reason why you couldn't add your own Linux drivers into the recovery ISO bust it open and put them in there so that they will detect when you do that recovery. Yeah.
But though, how much of a Linux expert do you have to be to move the hardware? So my hardware fails, I've got another piece that's close but not the same. How much help do you get, or not help, but how difficult is that process?
In all honesty, if you create some basic Linux physical machines or virtual machines, and you understand the bootloader and the way that partitions are created and labeled, how they are attributed, how you tell the system which is the boot partition. If you're familiar with parted, gparted, fdisk, all those commands, then it's a, I wouldn't say trivial, but it's certainly something. This is why I was saying earlier on, you need to know your original machine. It's no good just slapping the Veeam agent for Linux on there and just assuming that Linux is going to rescue you. You need to know what those partitions were in the first place in order to make sure those partitions are big enough for Veeam to be able to restore the volume into. Okay. All right, so how much of a Linux expert do you need to be? You don't need to be a guru, but you do need to have a basic understanding of how the partitions are laid out, how to recreate those partitions if you need to recover specifically to different hardware.
How tolerant is Linux of different chipsets?
Sorry, I missed that.
How tolerant is Linux of different chipsets?
Well, it's the detection, the auto detection of chipsets is ace. It's really good. In the early days when when Slackware 2 was about and you had 15 5.25 inch proper floppies, not those 3.5 inch stiffies, but the proper floppies, you had to create a boot disk, and it was wholly intolerant of any hardware that there wasn't a driver for, that you'd built a kernel for. Okay, totally intolerant. But today you can pretty much take any distro out of the box and install it on almost any modern hardware. Okay.
But if you're going from one, so go back to the failed physical server,
Yep.
another server, all you can get is a more modern server.
Yes. Well,
You restore.
yeah. Oh, so if you've got an ancient server and you've been running Linux on it for 10 years, then the information you need is bootloader, partition information, etc. When you move it to a modern machine, so long as the distro isn't older, or the version of the distro isn't older than the model of the hardware on the server, then generally it will function perfectly well. Yeah. So what I would really encourage you to do as Veeam advocates, specialists, and Veeam customers is to do a little bit with it before you actually need to support somebody. Okay, do something with it. Yeah, the worst time to start a Linux recovery is when somebody rings you up and says it's broken. Okay. All right.
Do you have any issues with LVM and resizing partitions or anything like that?
We don't resize partitions.
No, I mean,
Linux does.
yeah.
Yeah. So the volume manager resizes those. Remember, I said no physical. It can't be a physical. It must be a file system. The volume must be formatted with the file system.
Yeah.
So whilst Linux LVM will repartition, okay, we Veeam would. Do we recognise that? Yes. At the point of restore, though, you need to make sure that the volume is created to the new size, not to the size that you recorded when you first installed it. Yeah. So on recovery, it needs to be the bigger of the two.
So you've got to have the OS pretty much up before you do your restore.
You don't have to have the OS up, because you could use you can use the recovery CD, go to the command line, use parted, and use the command, use the partition and disk tools to be able to recreate what you had before. That's not installing the OS, yeah? And then use Veeam Recovery to recover the partitions. You may then have to go in and designate the root or system partition as the boot partition. You may also have to add some kernel commands if your original Linux kernel had some extra switches and commands on the boot line. Okay, those are the kind of things you need to record and be able to have on hand when you need to do that recovery, just in case. I mean, it may just go swimmingly, okay, and you might be lucky. But if you're not, you need to be in a position to be able to understand what you need to do in order to recover a Linux VM or a Linux physical machine.
It's, let's say virtual machine recovery.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier.
Basically, did you get away with just having the information that's kind of in the VMX file?
Yeah, it would still be good to know the bootloader. Still be good to know if there's any kernel switches. So the answer to your question is yes, it's easier, and having the VMX file on hand is useful.
But that information doesn't, you may not have access to that file.
That's right. Well, yeah, unless you've backed it up using Veeam, and then you can restore the VMX file. Yeah,
You may not have access to the
that's true.
console.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, good thought. Okay, so interaction with your customer, interaction with the service provider will be required in that scenario. Yeah. Hopefully you've not fallen out with them. Okay. Any other questions? These. They're excellent burgers, those, aren't they? All right, I think lunch is coming. What? After?
We're still a little bit away from lunch. Right.
Okay.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
No more questions? Right. Wonderful. Thanks very much for that.